let's not do that.
No, I.
November. Yeah, thank you. November webinar. Late in the month, and we kind of did that deliberately because we think we shouldn't have a December webinar. So we're as close to December as we can get without crossing over. So let's gather ourselves and be gathered for this time of, I think, both chatter, which we have been doing, but also some deeper engagement and some thinkings. And let's invite God with us. Our God is already with us, needs no invitation, but we need inviting of ourselves into God's presence. So if you would just pray with me, the Lord be with you.
And with you, Spirit.
God, the source of destiny of the cosmos, author of creation. In wisdom, you brought forth all that is to participate in your divine being and to change, adapt, and grow in freedom. You made holy the matter and energy of the universe, that it may delight you and give you praise. We thank you for gathering all creation into your heart by the energy of your spirit and bringing it through death to resurrection glory. Through the one in whom all things have their being, Jesus Christ, your wisdom and your word. Amen. All right. Well, some announcements and some business. I'm Jerry Capel. I am an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Kentucky and the executive director of the Center for Deep Green Faith. And let me share a screen with you at this point and invite you to if you haven't, to subscribe to our email. If you're here, you probably are already subscribers, but also to just make sure you know how to attend this website and to keep up with upcoming events. And so for this one, we are having this event with Payton on communing with nature. In January, we actually are going to have two webinars. The first one being the January 11th at 7:30. What we're going to talk about, I'd be curious how much everybody knows about Third Act Faith. A fairly newly organized organization by Bill McKibben for people who are older. I'll leave that definition open. Third act, though, is sort of the meaning of it is, your first act is to grow into adulthood. The second act is to be productive and raise children, or whatever it is that your productive life was. And the third act is, now that you have arrived and you have more time and even more wealth, usually, what do you do with your third part of your life? And the invitation for Third Act Faith Third Act is to join together in the struggle over climate change and the good of the planet and our place on it. So anyway, that's what Third Act is. We will have the director for the faith working group of Third Act with us on the 11th to talk about that organization, and perhaps even have maybe a discussion on, what is it incumbent upon those of us with perhaps more time and an accumulated skills from a lifetime. What's our role? What's our place? What's incumbent upon us for this? So, and then on the 25th, we will have Deb Reidstra, who is the author of Refugia Faith, with us. And both of those promotions will get posted on our website very soon. We'll post those in the next week or so to get those out there for you. And that's what's going on webinar-wise in January. Another thing that's going on is actually quite related to our topic for the night, and that is our own contemplative contemplation and care for creation certificate program. That's kind of our flagship program, and it is being organized right now for the next class And so Robin, if you want to take a minute and kind of tell folks where we are with that at this point, I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Sure. I'm Robin. I direct that program, but I'm one of the co-teachers of it. And the idea is that we practice nature contemplation over a long period of time. It's something you grow into. And so it's a spiritual formation program. We do that. And then, so we get the experiential part. We also work on creation inclusive theology so that we can understand through a Christian lens what this contemplative experience is all about. What does the incarnation mean in a creation inclusive context, or salvation, for instance, Pentecost? So we do that. And then we talk about, well, what are the implications of our experience and understanding for the way we live in society? And there are many deep implications. And so we examine that. Registration is open. You can get to it on our website. I'll drop that link in the chat if you want to take a look at the program in more depth. It's about a 9 or 10 month program. It will start next June. So we have several of us in the cohort tonight that are joining us. So I invite you to do that. We'll be using the Living in an Icon program for the contemplative aspect. And that's something you can do on your own with the group. We have a facilitator's manual as well as the book that each individual can use. So if you're interested in that, which we do use in our certificate program, I'll put the link in there and you can look at those books and see if that's something that would be useful to you, either personally or in your own particular ministries. So that's about all I have to say. Like I said, I'll drop those in the chat if you're interested in following through. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. So I think that's it for announcements and biz. An invitation we always give to you as we move toward this evening's program is to use the chat to as Payton engages us and questions come to you or comments come to you, go ahead and post them in chat. Mary, who is with Deep Green, will be monitoring that. There will be time toward the end of this meeting for just conversation with everyone. So we will open up for all those kind of questions. So you are invited to be engaged in thinking, and when things occur to you, just write that into chat. And we'll be picking up on those. We'll be surveying those before the evening is out, and and trying to get to them. So there is that. All right. So for tonight, we have with us Payton Hoegh. You know, Payton, I've never really asked you how to pronounce your last name.
Hoegh.
Hoegh.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, see, I should have asked. So Payton Hoegh, and he is a postulant for Holy Orders in the Diocese of Los Angeles. And his ministry has centered on creation care, contemplative practice, and creation of alternative spaces for our spiritual engagement and community weaving, particularly in and with the natural world. So here's that common thread for all of us. So he's a program director for the Center of Spirituality in Nature, which is a website we should drop in for people, for them to notice and go to, and perhaps subscribe. Founder and guide of All Wanderers, a contemplative spiritual community, and author of 2 sessions of the Episcopal Church's forthcoming creation care curriculum, Love God, Love God's World, which should be kind of out any minute, I guess. I think it's December now, which is upon us. So being looking for, if you need to Google Love God, Love God's World, or Episcopal Creation Care, Love God, Love God's World, and get registered for being kept up to date about that curriculum, which will be coming out like now. So it's a video-based curriculum. It's one of the big things that the Episcopal Church has come up with in the last few years. And so we will actually be hosting probably a webinar on that in the coming months as that emerges. So Payton holds a Master's of Divinity degree from Claremont School of Theology. And so with that, we welcome you, Payton, and take it away.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen for us all here. Try and move into the presentation. Can everybody see that all right? Fantastic. Well, I just want to start off by saying thank you to Jerry and Robin and everybody from Deep Green Faith for inviting me to share with all of you and to be with you. I will say just here right at the beginning that I'm a community weaver by trade and by call, and so slightly uncomfortable being just a talking head on the screen here with folks just kind of listening in. So please do follow along and share your thoughts and engage some dialogue in the chat. Mary is graciously going to be watching that for us so that this can be more of a dialogue. And you know, I'm really pleased to be here tonight just because it feels pretty appropriate that we're having this conversation as COP28 is just starting over in Dubai. And so I'm glad to be able to kind of engage all of you in this conversation as all of that is taking place. As Jerry mentioned, I am based in Southern California, and everything that I'm sharing tonight is really drawing from the last few years of my ministry, which is really focused on contemplative practice and small group practice specifically in the natural world and the ways that it interweaves and informs and enriches creation care. Over the last 2 years, I've been the program director for the Center for Spirituality and Nature, in addition to the small group that I lead here in LA. And just to introduce you to the organization, the center is a national nonprofit that is based in the Southeast in Arlington, Virginia. But the center offers instruction, resources, and opportunities just for meaningful and mindful experiences of the natural world. And the purpose and the intention behind that is to cultivate and nourish and encourage this lived, loving, reciprocal relationship with God, with one another, and with creation. And that work is really specifically to ground our spiritual journey through purposeful connection to and engagement with creation, the natural world, and seeing it as a teacher and a companion on our paths. So I just want to start off with a little bit of background here. I know that many of us are really steeped in the contemplative tradition, and spirituality and nature may be a familiar term, or it may be something that's a little new, but it seems self-explanatory. But I think it's important for us to define terms throughout our time together. And so when I speak about spirituality and nature, I'm really talking about that intentional practice of formation, of reflection, mindfulness, prayer, and particularly attention in and with creation. And of course, that's part of a rich tradition of contemplative faith formation within the Christian community and many religious contexts. The Center for Spirituality and Nature is an inner spiritual organization, but I'll speak tonight really from my own Christian lens, and I understand that that's probably going to resonate with a lot of folks who are on the call tonight. So contemplative practice and spirituality and nature, there is this powerful thread within Christian history where creation has played this really important role, this really has had a pivotal place in how we engage God, one another, our faith, and our practice. And from the earliest Christian communities and beyond within many different philosophies, nature has held this place alongside sacred texts as its own way of informing us and guiding us into relationship with God. And many early Christians understood the book of nature to be the earliest testament that we had of God. And so when we're talking about the ways that we engage contemplative practice, mindfulness in the natural world, this is not some out there concept for any of us. This really is something that is tied very tightly to our Christian tradition. And followers of Christ have really looked to the natural world as a vital resource for spiritual formation, for community building, and for renewal. We can see examples of that in scripture, of course, in Jesus' own spiritual practice, consistently taking place in the natural world. We can see it in Paul's proclamation and his epistles of creation as clear evidence of God. And even one of my favorite ways that this shows up in the Christian tradition is through the monastic communities of spiritual growth, all the way back to the deserts of Egypt, which have traced their progression into land-based spirituality and Christian theology in Celtic practice. And so that firm foundation of connection between Christians and the created world is something that really our present crises are calling us back to, because nature and the created world has lost some of its footing in how important it is in our personal practice and in our communal practice. But when we look at the ways that the world is moving, we see the crises that are developing. Nature offers a space of healing, of a source of collaboration and of growth that's going to be really important for us as we move forward. Now, again, I want to just name the fact that I'm speaking from a Christian lens and also from an Episcopal lens. And so I share this quote that's on the screen right now: "We are only fully human and fully alive when we are in right relationship with the whole created order," because this came from the Episcopal Church's House of Bishops in a statement that had to do specifically with responding to climate crises. And so I want to talk today about how vital and important small group spiritual formation and contemplative practice are to living out our faith, and particularly how living out our faith is itself a response to climate crises. Our faith formation is enriched, it's more fully and authentically realized when we are building relationship with the whole created order, as the House of Bishops affirm in this statement. As Paul would term it in Romans, God's power and divine nature have been clearly seen and are understood from what has been made. And Bonaventure kind of elaborated on that, saying that the whole material world is a mirror through which we may pass over to God. And so the practice of contemplative formation, of mindfulness in relationship, in dialogue with the natural world, is really building on this access point to God. It's building on this call to relationship that is present throughout our cosmology, and it's present very much in how we're called to act in response to crisis and crises. We can see God's presence, God's wisdom, and benevolence shining forth in the created world. And if we're not placing ourselves in positions to engage in that way, if we're not attentive to right relationship with the whole created order, nothing that we do in creation care, the solutions that we come up with, are going to be lived out fully, are not going to be holistic responses to this crisis, because it does not spring forth from our faith. So acknowledging this, I want to just explore together tonight how small group contemplative practice in the natural world is a really particular way of regrounding our faith, of rekindling hope in response to this really desperate time that we're all experiencing together. And then, of course, renewing our relationship with one another and our commitment to ecological relationship more broadly, all of which adds depth and richness to our understanding of our faith and to our understanding of creation care. So we'll start right there. So spirituality and nature and creation care. So at this point, in order to stop hearing myself talk, I want to really just invite you to give me your definition of terms and kind of your understanding of what creation care is, and then, of course, what it looks like in your community, your congregation, and your context. So if you can start to just share in the chat some of the ways that you view and experience creation care and the ways that you're living that out, that would be really, really helpful and hopefully guide us in some of our dialogue and discussion. And Mary, do you want to read maybe
Yes,
some of those
I
out?
was just about, yes. So we have from Deacon Joey Clavijo, the big question for Christians in the 21st century: how do we live into the gospel of Jesus Christ in a climate changed world? So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
It's really great. Don't leave me hanging here with just one response. That would be.
All right, we've got more. So M. Priestley says simplicity of life.
Mhm.
And Amy, honoring our world as the womb of all humanity. Jack Steiner says being in unity with God's creation.
Well said, well said.
Then we have Alan Ewing Merrill, kinship. First, acknowledging that we human beings are not separate from nature or over and above nature, but hang on. But mutually, hold on. And then we need to pay attention to how we live in the world, making connections between Christ's story and our own.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, did I miss any?
I think that leaves us.
Creation care is a mutual ministry goal, one of 3 key strategies for our church. That was Richard Harding. Creation care involves educating ourselves and living more sustainably in life-giving fashions. We're getting a lot of great comments. Paul, our community is building native gardens and teaching contemplative ecology. Hannah says, I think recognizing our connection to nature and the intersectionality between all faiths. And then, let's see, earth keeping, caring for the land where we live and other land we steward, daily seeking God's guidance, looking better, live with all of creation. Yeah, and
I'll call out Mary Linia's comment. As involved as they are, it's a negative, which I and very pertinent, I think, to this conversation. I don't spend all that much time in the woods.
Yeah, I was just about to get that.
Yeah, and I was taking it from you just because I was intrigued by the kind of reverse answer that it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love all those responses. I absolutely love those responses. And I think it's very clear that we're among friends here tonight. What's really standing out for me is that a lot of that is defining creation care, and less of that is what it looks like in action and in practice. And so we heard a little bit of it in gardening and contemplative gardening, and we paid reference to kind of building relationship. And so what I hope we can do tonight is really dig in on what it can look like to engage this expansive definition of creation care in practice communally. And so if I can carry us forward a little bit here, a really helpful definition for me or elaboration for me on creation care came from Paul Gorman, who had founded many years ago an interfaith collaboration on creation care. And Paul talks about how we're not, in our creation care work, the environmental movement in prayer. We're trying to bring care for God's creation to the heart of religious life, to weave programs to care for God's creation across the entire path of our religious experience. And then he names the fact that care for creation brings life to faith. And then he acknowledges that that is the intention of our practice always. It's that relationship with God, with one another, with this world that we are a part of. And Paul says, isn't God's creation and God's revelation calling us into the most intimate relationship? To be one with God, we must be part of God's creation. That's the deal. That's the original deal. And the unfortunate thing for me is that so often I see that we build up these walls to separate ourselves from creation, whether it's in our theologies that skew in Christian tradition a lot of times towards domination rather than stewardship, to use a really common word that's incomplete, or even really intentional relationship. We build up these barriers to that kind of engagement, and then we allow that to seep into our creation care initiatives and the ways in which we pursue creation care, particularly around the climate crisis. And that's really what I want to start with, because I had a conversation with Jerry over the summer. We were at a couple of different a conference and a festival over the summer, and we got a chance to sit down and talk a couple of times just about this issue of creation care being sometimes incomplete. Because a lot of times when we have green groups and creation care committees, our focus in practice is really on solutions to climate crisis and global climate change, ways that we can implement changes to our church structures, ways that we can make changes in our personal lives that are really going to hopefully move the needle towards solving climate crisis. And all of that is wonderful and right and good. And it's important for us to remember that creation care and the call of relationship with creation transcends that despite the fact that climate crisis is the single greatest issue that we're facing at this time, from my perspective, even if we were to solve climate crisis tomorrow, there would still be a call to relationship with the earth. There would still be a need and a vocation for building up this companionship, this appreciation, this acknowledgement, and this love for the created world. And that's something that I feel we need to weave into our creation care practices and the ways that we organize and orchestrate our creation care practice. The way that I've found is most effective in leaning into that reality that we as Christians need to move back into this place of recognition and relationship with the created world is through small group contemplative practice in the natural world. Because it really continues this ancient spiritual tradition of establishing, deepening, and expanding relationship. One really common quote that's thrown around when we have these conversations is that we can't love what we don't know, and we can't know what we don't see. And so when we're isolated away from the created world, when we don't spend time there, we don't build up that appreciation. We don't remind ourselves of the love that we have. And so that intentional act of mindfulness and engagement with the created world is in fact part and parcel of our work of creation care. And it's something that I think the church needs to be reminded of so that we can renew relationship with the created world. We can live more deeply into the call of God in this created order. And in so doing, we're going to respond to climate crisis because it's going to pour out from our love of the natural world. So to continue this process of defining terms and really explaining what small group spiritual practice looks like and offers, the natural world is a space that is accessible for many of us, not all in the same ways, but creation in the natural world offers a space for rest and renewal during a time where we need it most. I think all of us could attest to the fact that we have been experiencing weariness and exhaustion, no matter where we are or what our personal context is. And the created world, the natural world, offers this space for us to go and find a sense of peace and rest. It really draws and invites us into this space of deep reflection. There's something within the natural world, whether it's a chemical, which is kind of examined in a lot of forest bathing trainings, or if it is just this general sense, this spiritual resonance that draws us into mindful attention and to reflection. And that, of course, gives us access to these really unique gifts and wisdom that is only accessible in the natural world. Nature is this space of openness, of emptying. It's this kenosis happens in nature. It draws us into this experience of joy, of wonder, and awe that we need, particularly as we're responding to crises. And then it inspires us as it demonstrates creative adaptation. It shows us what resilience can look like. It demonstrates balance and even resistance. It's not this pure and beautiful place that is absent of suffering. In fact, it is very much marked by suffering. But the natural world shows us ways that we can respond to that, ways that that's part of our reality. So that space in the natural world that we have a chance to connect with really allows us access to beauty, but it doesn't hide from the reality of suffering. And so we can experience wonder and awe and balance that also with grief as we acknowledge loss and as we seek peace in wilder spaces. Now, I'm really partial to this reminder from Sister Joan Chittister, who really touches the ways that contemplation and action are interwoven. So even as we step out into the natural world and we seek out this space of teaching, of peace, of rest, renewal, and of relationship, that will draw us back to action. Sister Joan talks about contemplation as a dangerous activity, bringing us face to face with God, face to face with the world, face to face with ourselves. And then the acknowledgement comes that something must be done when there's recognition that there's an imbalance. So through contemplative practice in the natural world, we become connected to everything, to everyone. We really cultivate and nourish this love for and attention to the world. And we carry the whole world in our hearts then, and the zeal for justice can consume us. And from that space, action and prayer become one. So if we are to kind of move into this space of acknowledging contemplative practice as an essential part and component of creation care activities, then we can recognize that this practice can draw us into our local ecosystems to start to better understand and connect to those places. We can't build a relationship with a place that we're not present in. And so that's why I appreciate so much that acknowledgement. I don't step out into the forest very often. It doesn't have to be the forest. It's really just whatever is around you. And choosing to be present there in that space is a really intentional act, and it's a really powerful act, because that helps us to acknowledge our reciprocal relationship with the earth, all that we receive from the natural world and the created order, and also all that pours out of us in response, for good or for ill. And so when we can acknowledge that reciprocal relationship, we can reflect on imbalance that our actions have created, the ways that the way we live our lives has led to environmental degradation and contributed to environmental crises. And so if we can see that more clearly, if we can connect to that imbalance, if we can connect with that ill health, we can start to grieve the damage done. And that, of course, is always done most effectively and powerfully in community. We can do that independently and experience this loss through personal practice of mindfulness. But when we gather together in community to lament loss, something powerful happens. And from that, we can then move to this space of imagination. So the natural world invites us into this reflection. It invites us into this important act of repentance, and then it moves us forward by inspiring us through our intentional awe and touching of wonder into a spark of imagination for what it looks like when we move beyond the loss and we move into something new, to the possibility beyond crisis. Not just an endpoint, we've solved this global issue, but we've started to move ourselves back into right relationship, something that we need to carry forward as a personal vocation and as a communal vocation as the Christian church. So what does it look like really in action? I know just based on the responses that we've had already from our question about creation care, that many of you are engaging this already. Many of you are hearing some of this resonating in your heart, and that it echoes some of what you're already putting into practice. And so the question I have for you now is, how do you already engage this practice of repairing relationship with the earth, nourishing relationship with creation, so that you can better live out your vocation of creation care? What does it look like for you? How do you already engage it? And then, of course, what might it look like to do that beyond a personal practice, to call a community into contemplative practice and mindfulness in the natural world?
Is that a question for us, Payton? Are you wanting
Absolutely.
something?
Absolutely, question. Drop it in the chat if you can, and just kind of.
Or raise your hands. There is a hand raising function under call. It's called reactions on the bottom of your screen. If you want to speak, you can click on reactions, because there's more than one screen here. We can't see you raise your hand physically like this. So there's more than one. There's too many of us in the room. But if you click on raise hand and reaction, it will bump you to the top of the screen.
So we do have one comment in the chat. Carrie says contemplative walking, meditations in the woods. Yes to that. Mary Fran says, I garden and am changing how I manage my lawn. Linnea Stifler, Holy Heights. For Malin, I go for a late night walk several times a week, at least once a week, try to visit one of the nature preserves near where I live in Maine. As I walk, I aim for a posture of relationship. I befriended a giant oak tree and a cluster of hemlocks in Baxter Woods in Portland, Maine. So those are some of our comments from the chat. Do we have anyone raising their hands? Yes, I see Deacon Joey.
So my experience when I participated in Living in an Icon in 2019 and 2020, and it really is all about experience to me. It's not theology, it's not in the head, it's feet on the ground, is that it connected me. I saw the world in a very small place before I practiced weekly, daily. You know, that was when the pandemic came down. So I had lots of time to be one with God in creation, you know. And to me, it made me whole, and it made my relationship with God whole. I think one of the problems we have is that we don't see big enough. We don't see the big picture. We don't see the cosmos and how we fit into the real big creation picture, you know. So it was really experience, and it was God's gift to me, what I was able to take out of that experience.
Thank you, Joey.
That's it.
We have a couple more comments in chat that I can share too. Bruce says, quiet, solitary walking in the stillness of the woods and gardening is his practice. We have from Charlene, sitting by the beach in California, breathe with the ocean waves, pray and write. Bart says, I sit and listen to God in creation. Molly says, planning a nature Advent retreat in our congregation to practice living in an icon. Douglas, enjoying the natural world in the woods behind my house in Perdido Beach, Alabama. And Carrie says, faith communities engaging in Natura Divina during seasonal building grounds cleanup days. So that's
great. And
we've received so far. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Stacy has
Oh,
her
I
hand
see it.
up.
Yes, I see a hand up.
I just wanted to make, there's something that's really important as I'm moving towards helping our congregation move towards a very active creation care centrality. Something that's always been important to me is the fact that there's a question that's always missing in all the best of intentions and all the things that we do, and that is, we don't ask the question, how do we make that bird's life so rich that they can live as God made them to live? So, for example, I started a practice in my congregation early on. I do it for data purposes, but also to bring home to my congregation the importance of our sanctuary. And that is, I do a bird survey, and then I do an observational narrative that is tied into some liturgical concept, incarnation or resurrection or forgiveness, and the narratives bring people to a place where they realize that these creatures have a value for their own lives, quite apart from what we actually assign them, and that God created them is enough for me to say that, that spider, I feel really bad when I hit a web of an orb weaver, right? Because that spider spent a long time making that web so that it would have food, right? And it's not just that spider web is in my way. I destroyed that spider web, and I end up feeling very, very bad about that. And I've had a lot of wonderful observational narratives that I've shared in these sanctuary minutes. And what it has really done is it has changed the minds of many of my more skeptical, church community members. And I was mentioning recently that one who is a physicist, and everything is very, was very skeptical about the climate crisis, and one of the harder ones to reach. And I never got into any arguments with them or anything. And one day I had been doing these sanctuary minutes and sending them out to the congregation every week. And he came up to me and he gave me a big hug and he said, I just love those sanctuary minutes. They've really helped me rethink and, change my mind, right, about certain things. And so I think that if part of creation care contemplation has to centrally be located around the recognition that every creature that you interact with, their life matters to them. And their ability to live as God gave them life, it's not my right to determine whether that has a value or not. And therefore, my stewardship is making it possible for them to live as fully into what they are as possible. So I think that's an important part for us anyway, and certainly for me in the contemplation conversation.
That's really well said, Stacy. I appreciate even what you said about the orb weaver. I think it was Wendell Berry who talks in this framing, but it's not just that God created the orb weaver, but this orb weaver, this particular spider. And we never get to that place if we don't step into that space, if we don't build that relationship of recognition. And that is what we're being called to in creation care. Beyond all of the initiatives that we can build out as a response to climate crisis and environmental degradation, that relationship, that willingness to step into an understanding of each individual tree in your backyard, each blade of grass as being touched with the divine spark, that changes something in how we see and interact with the world, and something that I believe that we need to cultivate and nourish in our faith practice. And so as we step forward, because I want to be really conscious of our time, I want to just move towards that practical element of what this can look like and why, and how it can really connect with the work that you're doing in creation care. And so I've been working with several communities over the past couple of years, building out spirituality and nature groups that engage regular practice in the natural world. And so I've got a couple of references to those groups here as a way of demonstrating how meaningful this can be. And so Alessa, who had a group in Davis, California, talks about how spirituality and nature gatherings allow us to enjoy and marvel at God's creation, build that community. But she also references that it's a reminder of the amazing web of life and our reciprocal responsibility to Earth and each other. This is from JD Hansen. I love JD. And this is one of the most powerful things that I heard as I've been moving into this space of ministry. And JD talked about the Creation Care Committee at his church. It's a Methodist church. And he talked about how there's an abundance of people in our community that are invested in the climate crisis intellectually, but they hadn't gotten to the place of connecting to that work emotionally. And I think that Stacy mentioned just the way that we respond to those who are skeptical of the science. And one thing that is very clear and has been proven out and played out in a study from the Yale Center for Climate Change Communications is that emotions are a stronger predictor of whether people will support or oppose climate change policy than anything else, including people's politics, cultural, or group affiliations. And so when we step into the natural world, when we start to repair and recover this relationship with the created world, that's when we start to lean into the emotion. It's when we start to stir up an emotional response to creation and a loving, lived relationship with the natural world. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about communal contemplative practice in nature. And so just to give you a handful of things that you can draw from and kind of pull from this whole presentation, there's a lot of different ways that this can look like in action. And the Center for Deep Green Faith is one of the primary places that I would send you for incorporating this into your creation care work. What it can look like, spirituality and nature groups are really kind of my primary mode of building this out. I'll give a little idea of what that looks like in the next slide. But group curriculum engagement, like what Robin shared earlier in our time together, is a really important one. Outdoor sits, meditation, and the practice of ritual in nature. Cleanups and climate pilgrimages, really having a personal experience of what it looks like to be in the presence of environmental degradation or the consequences of climate crisis, and to see that as a spiritual experience. Mindful gardening, and then wilderness church experiences. All of these are ways that we can start to incorporate small group practice, contemplative, mindful experiences of the natural world, and weave it into our initiatives of creation care. Anyone who's interested in regular engagement in this way, please do reach out to me. Spirituality and nature groups are small groups that are intentionally constructed in order to create space and opportunity for engagement with the natural world and engagement with spiritual formation in our local ecosystems. We've got a network right now of over 30 spirituality and nature groups in 18 states and Washington, D.C., and we're growing all the time. And so that's one way. We've got a cohort of Episcopal churches engaging this that I'd love to continue to add to. And so I'd love to see more and more churches engage this as an expression of creation care. And we've got some pretty particular resources around that. Living in an Icon is a really great curriculum that you can incorporate mindful practice into relationship with the natural world. In addition to that curriculum, the Center for Spirituality and Nature has the Spiritual Wisdom of Trees, which has been a really popular course of study that's built up some beautiful communities, engaging what trees can teach us about what it means to be living out ecological faith, what it means to really live authentically into our call towards creation care, and to be stepping on the earth lightly and being mindful of the ways that we engage reciprocal relationship. Love God, Loves Earth is a forthcoming curriculum from the Episcopal Church. And then Nature, Our First Way of Knowing God, and Igniting the Advocate's Heart are two other curriculums that we've got that you can engage. Here's some additional resources that I wanted to just call folks' attention to. And then I'm going to wrap up my time here just by thanking everybody for being part of this, but also just underlining the primacy of relationship in all of this conversation. And if our creation care work starts to become clouded by fatalism and even this movement towards solutions rather than lifestyle changes, then we're not doing this right. If we don't start to look at creation care as a foundational part of our living out our faith, then we're failing to live fully into our vocation. And I think Robin Wall Kimmerer speaks to that really, really beautifully and ties it all back to love, that we're not in control. But what we know is that relationship endures, and that when we start to be attentive to the natural world and our part in it, we start to restore that relationship, that respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. It becomes an outpouring of love. And that is exactly what our world needs right now. And so I'll stop sharing, and hopefully we have a little bit of time for some dialogue around all this.
Yeah, we do. Thank you. I think there's a lot. I think there's probably folks in this room have mixed levels of experience with this thing you're talking about. What's, I think, perhaps intriguing is the idea that what we really need is some discipline and some communal practice. I think I would guess at the level of experience generally, there's going to be exceptions to all that, is individuals and their love for nature, and individuals in their walking in the woods and or other things on the beach or whatever. What I hear you calling us to is something far more akin to church done rightly anyway. Not often church are not often places of spiritual practice, I'm afraid to say. They should be. But the idea that what our souls needs is a community of practice that engages the larger web of life. And I love one of the questions in the chat, which was, what do you do with the mosquito? What do you do with the negative, difficult parts of nature, the red and tooth and claw, the savagery and the brutality? And it's kind of like, that's part of the spiritual discipline.
That's right. What do you do with those people in your congregation? You know what I mean?
Exactly right. It is similar and the same, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I love that.
Yeah, me too. But anyway, so we got time. We got a good 15-20 minutes. So Mary, do you want to jump in with questions in the chat? Other people want to raise their hands. How do you want to proceed?
Yeah, I can see it. There's some good questions here in the chat.
I am, yeah, go ahead. If
Yeah,
you
do you want me to
see one
just
that
kind of go
jumps,
through
yeah, if you see one that jumps out at you, I needed to unmute myself. I realized I was talking into the air. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The first was that I saw was Sing Group's or spirituality and nature experiences geared for children. And the beautiful thing is that contemplative practice, mindful practice is really needed by all of us. And time in the natural world is something that has been proven to be beneficial to us on several levels. There's a lot of spirituality and nature groups that are really, really excited about bringing this to youth, young adults, and children, just because I think all of us who are a little bit further in our lived experiences can see that it's necessary for them to have that time of quiet, of peace, and of contemplation. And so, yes, spirituality and nature groups can be and should be for young ones as well as those of us who are a little bit further in our lived experiences.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Deacon Joey that says, I'm seeing the work of the Center of Spirituality and Nature as the daily exercise of eco-spirituality. How important is it then to connect this experience of encountering God and nature, to connect it to the gospel through carrying it to eco-theology? How can the church do this next step? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really powerful question. It really is. And yes, you're absolutely right that the work of the center is really focused on regular practice of eco-spirituality. And we don't necessarily take it that next step in exploring eco-theology because we are an interspiritual organization. And so our theologies differ. But my encouragement is for anyone who's engaging this practice to start to explore what it means for you when you have these experiences in creation. How does it change the way you experience your faith? What does it teach you about how God is present and moves in the world now, and how God speaks through the world? And so I think that is something that what I love about the Spirituality and Nature Group Network is that it allows for this flexibility and creativity so that it can be really a reflection of the leaders and the communities themselves. And so while we encourage this eco-spiritual experience, our encouragement to all of our guides and leaders is that they carry that work forward into the exploration of eco-theology and bring that into the experience of what it is to be church. And that's kind of what Jerry was saying is that, to our detriment, sometimes our church experiences have been less about spiritual practice and are very much observation of ritual and liturgy, which is necessary and important work. And in order to live fully and holistically into our faiths, we need to practice. We need to have a continuous and regular experience of God. And that happens in the church building, and it happens day to day between Sundays as well.
And I'll jump in on that one too, because the center is probably much more willing to jump into the theology than you guys, because while we consider ourselves inter-religious, we're pretty Christian. And this is a really big, I think most people in the room in churches and stuff actually don't know what theology is for. They think for the most part, it's a way of drawing boundaries so that somebody's either, with us or not with us. The theology is about being right or wrong. And it is critical, I think. So this is a whole nother webinar, right? To say, what's the relationship between spiritual practice or spirituality and theology? What does theology do for us that spirituality doesn't, or what does spirituality do for us that theology doesn't? And I guess maybe shorthand might be that theology is the thing that helps us be community. If we're focused only on individual spiritual experience, then we're still private citizen. Theology is the agreed, or at least, somewhat agreed, just a shorthand for, and this is what we think is going on. This is how we name God in this. This is how we say that this is not just a thing, but it's a spiritual thing, or not just anything, but God's thing. So it's pretty critical work. Anyways, so yeah, I just want to pick on that because we do deal a lot in that.
And I think people need that. People need
absolutely. Yeah,
guidance in that work of developing that frame of understanding, right? And so I think that's a lot of what I've seen over the past couple of years in my work with the center, is that people crave connection with other folks who are on a similar journey. A lot of times folks can't find that for themselves. And so, the work that I do on the day-to-day, like I said, is mostly about community weaving. It's building a hub of relationship. And I think that Deep Green Faith does the same. And so that's an important part of what we need to do in addition to this small group practice, is to start to connect with one another and talk to each other more, practice together more, and engage on these different levels of personal mindful practice, communal mindful practice, and then widening that into a fuller body of God.
Mary calls out that we've been doing theology all night. I agree.
Yes.
I
And
might,
it looks like Sarah has her hand raised, but Robin, sorry.
Okay, go
that's
ahead.
all right. I was just going to add to what Jerry was saying, that they just don't, it's not just a complementarity going on there, but that if our understanding of our faith doesn't include creation, it can actually preclude our experiences. So it's very important to have an understanding that's consonant with our experience. So otherwise you get cognitive distance, or you don't even experience what's going on. So the two really do work well together and are necessarily should be joined together.
And then, Sarah, so you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I'm really part of the interfaith group in that I'm both a practicing Episcopalian and a teacher of yoga philosophy and practices. And I very much think this is something that's going to take all of us, if we're going to help our planet, it's going to take all of us. And I very much agree with the sentiments just expressed about humans are a social species. And so I think, that this needs to be, that there does need to be a faith, an emphasis on doing these things as a group. And I'm so happy to see some of the things that were presented here. Another thing, though, was mentioned very early, and I think it's very, very important, and that's the idea of exposure. I was a very fortunate child in that I was taken camping by my parents all over the United States, and I fell in love with nature. And then, as an adult, as the academic director of a yoga school, I'm out there trying to teach these beautiful Vedic prayers that are, the prayer for peace, that may there be peace in the flowing waters and peace in the plants, and it goes on, and peace in the humans, and may the peace of the absolute God be ours. And I think, what about the students who occasionally come in and they grew up in the cities, very large cities with asphalt and concrete and very, very little exposure to nature. So I think, again, that, all of these programs that can take us as groups out into nature for prayer and meditation are very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then there's that one question that is the theology. Does evil exist in the natural world? Can the natural world cause evil? Does
Yeah.
Yes,
natural
Gary,
evil
I was
exist?
about to get to that one. Yes,
There's theology.
That is theology.
Absolutely.
We can't solve that, or should not solve that here in the next 5 minutes. But
Yeah.
that's why it's important, I think. Number one, so Payton, here's an interesting exercise, I guess. What's the difference between the experiential and maybe contemplative engagement with this thing called evil and the theological engagement of this thing called evil? And so the contemplation, I guess, would be that if you stop and attend, you notice that there's death and dying and suffering else, and even unfairness, right? Where more than half of the newly hatched do not live to see adulthood, or even only 1 in 1,000, for no fault of their own, okay, what do we call that? Then when you ask the question, what do we call that? Now you're doing theology, because now we are talking with each other, trying to give meaning to this, and so on. Yeah, and so that just struck me, that's a perfect question that sets this up.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it most because it just, we're projecting this study or this analysis onto the natural world, which usually it's more general than that. Why is there evil? This question of why is it present? That question then of, does it exist in the natural world, and can the natural world cause evil, is really interesting to me. I can't even begin to say, I can't even begin to have a full response to it, because I think it requires some deep attention. But Jerry, I love just that separation of a theological response and a contemplative response to that question, because to me it really is, it's the theological response being kind of how we frame it and we name it, and the contemplative response being how do we acknowledge it as a real experience of our lives. And then for me, the outpouring of that is how you respond to it. And as I kind of mentioned in my response to the question, that is what's most compelling to me, is that when we're faced with something and we acknowledge it, the next step to that is how do we live our lives in response to that reality? What decisions do we make? What actions do we take with that very real experience that, yes, disaster, suffering, harm, injustice is part of our existence? And contemplation for me is what I think equips us. That mindful experience of deep attention is what equips us to take actions that are life-giving and respond to even evil and suffering in ways that lives into mutual thriving.
And just for the fun of it, in the last minute or so, to respond to some of the comments that say evil doesn't belong in the natural world, it just belongs with humans, you've just taken us out of the natural world. And so it's kind of like, not so sure, not so fast, because now you've made us unnatural. And that's a huge theological question. So anyways, all right, I'll shut up. Where we got? We got one more or two.
All right, let's see. Let me back up here too. We have a lot of comments, but I'm looking.
We have a raised hand too. We can jump on.
Okay, yeah, I cannot see that from where I am.
Yes, Stacy has her hand raised.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of address the question of evil in nature, because I've thought about this for years. And God gave us free will as human beings, which makes us, in a sense, unique. I don't think that non-human life is without free will. But there are consequences that are built into every action collectively and individually. So we have equivalent action, we have equivalent consequences for actions that we take, that we can see and experience. But then collectively, we have consequences for our actions as human beings. And a lot of times, as we see, the earth is entirely angry right now. I mean, she's fighting a battle which she feels she may not win. And so when the earth is out of balance and it can't rebalance itself, there's a consequence for that. And that comes in the form of hurricanes, floods, things that are so overwhelming to us right now that we just, we're just overwhelmed by them. But I think that they are consequences. I don't think they're a form of evil in nature. It's the earth fighting back, trying to remind us, and isn't it, I think I don't remember the scriptural exact statement, but God says that he makes the small things to humble the large, right? So when you think about like insects, viruses, all these things that we cannot see, it's a way to make us realize that we have this profound responsibility. And if we unleash things and we don't take care of what we need to take care of and what we have a responsibility to take care of, those things get unleashed, right? So I kind of see this as a consequence as opposed to an evil. I think it's a consequence of collective action over time, and our own actions feed into that whole collective. But that's how I've thought about it for years. So I don't see those things as evil. I think they're things we should be paying attention to because they're consequences. God's telling us they're consequences. We should be paying attention to these consequences. But that's my orientation to it. And I know that a lot of people have a different view than that, and I'm interested in hearing different views on that. But that's my take on it.
Yeah,
we won't hear them in this space, but this is it, right? It's important. It's important for you to say it, and it's important for the rest of us to engage it. I'm afraid I may have invited a sidebar. But anyways, okay.
Always.
So we are at, I think, about 10 till. So 10 till the hour in whatever time zone you are in. Pretty close. Anything else, Mary, that you want to call out before we
Let me
let
double
people
check.
go?
Well,
Payton, anything?
we have more on evil.
I'll have to have a separate webinar for that.
I think maybe we need to
Yeah.
have a whole discussion on that.
Absolutely.
About evil being intentional. Nature does not intend to harm others, so it's not evil. Let's see if you want to comment on that. But also I'm looking back, and then we had thoughts on composting as a spiritual practice.
Yeah, which hopefully we'll connect after this as well on that. That's Hannah, I think. I did drop my email in the chat as well. I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in this work and these experiences and bringing it to your communities in a way that it can be really consistent, regular practice. So.
Yeah, the same thing for us. Our main way of doing what Payton, you are doing is in this large 1 year long certificate program, for those who sign up. But it's really true that just like you, we need to be figuring out ways for groups of people in small places to engage. And so I guess the invitation, we'll make the same invitation you just made, that if you want to, if you and some you around you want to figure out a way to practice, deepen this practice, let us know, let Payton know. And his methods may be more developed than our, well, no, the methods aren't, but his organization is along that line, I think, than we are, but we're wanting to do the same thing. So, all right. So copies of quotations. So what about your PowerPoint? Is there a version of it that you're willing to let us share with the?
Yeah, I think I can share those with folks so that you can pass it along in response.
And of course, remember that this talk will also be posted on our YouTube channel, this webinar. But if you want those, like in hard copy.
All right. With that, any other comments for the good of the order for the evening on this last day of November 2023? We have just passed a full moon. What was the name of that moon? Does somebody remember? It was
there was a beaver moon.
It was
right?
Beaver moon. That's exactly what it was. It was a beaver moon just a couple nights ago.
Well done.
and that's one of the ways to, if you got people who can't get out into the wild and do stuff, you can start attuning. Where are the birds right now? How far along are they? Where are the monarchs? Who has come and who has gone? Which moon was this? And where's Jupiter? Those are also ways to attune and make relational that which is around us. All right, blessings to you all, and have a good night, and Merry Christmas. We will see you in January.
Thank you all. I hope we hear from you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thanks. Great job, Payton.
Indeed, that seemed to have gone quite well with a very large crowd.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed or really appreciated your talk, Payton.
Very
That
good.
resonated real.
Very
strongly.
good.
Thanks.
Well
What
done.
we
Sounded
can-
like a lot of folks were on the same page,
Mhm.
which
I
is
think-
always nice.
I think it just goes to show the hunger that's out there,
Mhm.
the interest, the level of interest.
Yeah. It's just a connection
think that's
point.
what-
That's,
Do you want me to say anything? Any about you?
Hey, Bart,
Hey, Bart.
Hey,
what's happening, man?
Bart and Penny.
hold on.
Can't see your face. You guys are hiding.
There I
Ah,
am.
there's
There you
Bart.
are.
Where's
We're
Penny?
here at University Medical Center in New Orleans. Penny's been here for over a week now.
Oh,
What?
She
What's
and Payton, pardon me for our local chat.
no, not at all.
She fell and fractured her pelvis.
oh,
Over a week
Oh,
ago.
I'm so
oh,
sorry. Well, Penny, I'll certainly add you to my prayers.
gee.
good.
I
I didn't
did.
know such a thing.
And so, Robin, forgive me for not writing back.
Oh, yeah, goodness.
I think
sakes.
that's a very good excuse.
Thank you.
Anyway, hey, Yolanda.
She's
Right,
right.
Yolanda's your kin in this falling in.
Yeah,
That's
I have osteoporosis.
Ah,
Yeah.
Goodness sakes.
And I had 3 surgeries in 4 days.
Oh, my.
oh,
So I
Mr.
I didn't even get my eyes fixed.
Tell them that they screwed you together, dear.
I got 3 11-inch screws in my pelvis.
Wow.
Oh, my
Oh,
goodness.
my goodness.
Uh,
Oh,
Have fun at the airport.
She's
from
one
here on
with
out.
now.
Definitely.
Anyway, Bart said he had to go to.
No.
So I just wanted
no.
you guys prayers.
Ah,
Yeah.
Well, definitely.
patient.
ah,
well, you will
I-
definitely be in our prayers.
Okay, I need a little patience and letting myself heal.
Yep, yep,
yeah, a
yep.
lot of
Take your
patience.
time.
It takes,
So
Okay,
do we need to be praying for your nurses too then? Is that-
my husband more than my nurses, both.
Wow.
Anyway, I love you guys. Thank
Love
you.
too.
oh,
Yeah, well, rest. We probably wore you out in the last hour and a half here, so.
Well, I dozed on and off. I heard most of it though. I love you. Bye.
Love you
too.
too.
Bye.
Good night.
Indeed.
bye, Bart.
All right, everyone, is that it?
Yeah,
I
yeah, well,
think
thank you,
so.
Payton, again. I'd love to, yeah, I hope that we stay in connection and
Yeah, I hope so. I think we're doing a lot of overlapping work. And so,
Yeah.
Jerry and I connected pretty extensively this
Fine.
summer, and I'm
Turned
hopeful
off.
we can continue to collaborate. So,
Yeah.
Right, we should do something with that in the new year, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
And send your whatever version in a PDF maybe or something of your PowerPoint to the center, and I'll send it to Elizabeth. I think she's the one that would send it out to the
Oh,
registered group,
right,
because contact should have that registered group. So.
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the opportunity. It was great to connect.
Yeah,
with
it's
all-
good.
with
Thank
some more
you.
folks.
Thank you for doing it. May folks come our way.
I hope so. All right. Blessings to you.
All right.
Blessings. Good
All
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Good night.